Hello everybody, Jordan here. The PH is silent. And in this episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, we talk about Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the new book announced by Wizards of the Coast, as well as the Artificer class. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another wonderful Saturday morning. Can't wait to tell you about all the news.
Happy to have you here watching us live. Fantastic to see everyone. We got some people in YouTube chat. We got some people in Twitch chat. We probably have some people in space chat, and they're currently chatting in space. I was thinking, like, never mind. I had to focus this morning because I was like, I messed up the intro last week. I need to rehearse. So before we went live, I rehearsed like 3 times and finally got the intro right, which is good. Lots of D&D news this week. Last week we were kind of like sitting on our hands, being like, well, they'll announce something at some point, and then they just kind of announced everything, it feels like. And and by the way, here's the Artificer Unearthed Arcana that you were waiting for, and here's all this stuff just came at the end of the month, February 28th. It is now March 2nd. But what's going on in the world of D&D? Let me open my notes.
So much. So it was funny because we got done with our show last week and we were expecting an announcement by then. We thought we'd have the article probably within that week, but then we were like, well, maybe we'll get it later this week. And it was like probably within hours, you sent me a tweet after our show that was, hey, look what leaked on Amazon. So I ran over, looked at Amazon, and there it was. Ghosts of Saltmarsh has been announced. And I think you nailed it. I think if you go back several shows, you talked about how you were kind of calling this idea that it might be another Tales from the Yawning Portal style book. It might be a grouping of 4 or 5 or 6 different adventures together that maybe can work together, but also can maybe be dropped into your campaign just one at a time or willy-nilly as you wish. And I think that's what we're getting. We're getting a very much a Tales from the Yawning Portal kind of style book. But it's interesting. This one's interesting because it's started out as a Greyhawk adventure set, and they haven't shied away from that. They said it's in
they have. I mean, they've said that it's Greyhawk originally, but like an interview with Kate Welch, she was saying on the D&D YouTube channel that like this is going to be as system neutral as possible. Like they want you to be able to take it and plop it into your own homebrew adventure. So Saltmarsh can exist anywhere, even though it was originally a Greyhawk adventure. Or a series.
I feel like
Greyhawk
they went to
adventures.
great lengths to make sure that it was.
They really want you to know you can use this in your Forgotten Realms campaign. We're not abandoning Forgotten Realms, but it was the same. But I didn't feel that with Tales of the Yawning Portal. You know, they weren't just like, by the way, Tomb of Horrors doesn't exist in Forgotten Realms, but it can in your. Like they didn't have the same emphasis on that, and maybe because all of these adventures come from the same world, they were very much like, we have to reiterate this, whereas the adventures of the Tales of the Yawning Portal were all over the place. Like Dead and Thay was set in Forgotten Realms, but other ones were set in other campaign settings. So
So I think I'm happy because I love a Greyhawk campaign world. I was hoping that at some point down the line we might get a Greyhawk campaign book, but I've also started to lean towards more of like what we've talked about in the last few weeks. You brought it up quite a few times, this idea of, do we really need an Eberron campaign book? Do we really need a Dark Sun or a Spelljammer? We have them. We can use those. We can just still use the rules that we have. All of the fluff and all of the history and all of that stuff can still be pretty similar. You don't need new books for that piece.
And it was Sly Flourish that said that in one of his videos, and I really latched onto it, where I hadn't really thought about it, because we want new stuff, and we want, like, I want ship mechanics for Spelljammer. Like, I want all of these monsters for Spelljammer. I want Spelljammer left and right. When he was like, if you're an experienced enough DM, you can use the AD&D Spelljammer stuff and change it on the fly. Like, you could literally look at a 2nd edition monster and be like, it feels like it should be like this. And since the CR system is so fluid anyway in 5th edition, it kind of works. That being said, a lot of people were like, well, what about new DMs? They can't do that. And I'm like, but if you're a new DM, you're probably playing in the Forgotten Realms because you're not bored of it yet to want to branch out to being D&D in space, you know?
Or homebrewing because you just had this big idea. Because that's what a new DM might just try to tackle.
I'm going to tackle Lost Mines of Phandelver. You know, that's what I'm aiming at. Or, so. And I really agree with that. I think Sly Flourish really... I think he's right, you know, like we don't necessarily need all of this, although it's fun.
Right. And that was the point I was gonna make too, is like, although if they do release one, I'll be just as happy. I'll buy it and I'll get into it. So I'll be super cool if they did, but I realized I don't need it as bad as I thought I needed it. Like, I want it, I would love it, but I don't necessarily need it. I can make it work without it. So that was really cool. So we're getting Ghosts of Saltmarsh, very nautical themed. We're getting some new rule sets that help us deal with nautical themed stuff.
And there's a lot of underwater combat, I feel, that's going to take place in these adventures. And I know there's rules for underwater combat in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I wonder if they're going to expand upon that too, because they said that they've got new rules for ships and they've got new rules for all this other stuff. But I wonder if we're going to get necessarily new rules or maybe new weapons that work better underwater, so you don't have disadvantage with your hammer, things like that. I'm just picturing a full, like a fighter in full plate armor just diving in with a hammer and he just sinks like a rock. It's like, well, you died. Good job.
Or I'm looking at stuff like the water breathing spell, or something that gives you free action or free movement kind of spells that try to make it so that you're getting away from some of the negatives of being underwater. Because the reality of trying to fight anything underwater, I mean, it's good it's in fantasy because you couldn't do it. It's not like you can wrestle an alligator at the bottom of a lake.
And I had an underwater combat in my homebrew game a long time ago, and I'm realizing now that I did it wrong, because when this book came out, I started reading up on the DMG's rules of underwater combat, and you have disadvantage using just about every weapon except very certain ones. Like a trident, you don't have disadvantage on, pointy spear like weapons. But like a hammer or a sword or things like that, I think a dagger, you're fine. But it's interesting. You really limit your players, and certain spells, like you have to be able to mouth those words underwater, and so
it'll be interesting. Now, I'm not saying that it's funny because this book is one of the books that maybe I wasn't thinking I needed. Like, I haven't been having this hankering for running a sea adventure or a piratey kind of adventure. And I haven't really stumbled across in my mind like this idea that, oh, you know what, I want to send my players to an underwater city. Not that I'm sure there are thousands and thousands of people that have had that idea in their mind. They've just been waiting for this book to say, now I can finally do it, or give them that, just enough of a nudge to say, that's it, I'm going to do it. I'm sending my players to Atlantis, or I'm sending my players to the underwater city of the Sahuagin or whatever,
Right.
And so it's interesting. I'm wondering, so just a couple of actual real facts. So we should see the book on May 21st everywhere. I did see in one of the interviews they were doing with Jeremy Crawford, they talked about they wanted to align all the release dates. Instead of it being there's a couple of days and the brick and mortars get it, then there's another couple of days and you can get it from one online source, and then Amazon gets it and ships it out like on a different date. Apparently, we're all just moving right to May 21st, available everywhere in every format, in every way possible.
Yeah.
D&D Beyond, your
basically online stores versus your brick and mortar stores, is because before they were kind of basically helping the brick and mortar stores, your friendly local game store, by releasing it early. And this time they're not going to do that. And I wonder if they just acknowledge 90% of our sales come from Amazon or something. I'm not sure. And that could just be because Amazon's cheaper than the $50 MSRP in the store. So it's kind of different.
They stick to that in the store. When I go pick up all those books I bought on the shelf, they were all $49.99 times tax.
Amazon's just cheaper, and that's really what it comes down to.
So May 21st, mark that on your calendars for when that comes out. We know we're going to have a big streaming event before that to launch the whole thing. It should be bigger and better than the Stream of Many Eyes, so that should be very interesting. The other thing to keep in mind is if you really want to get something interesting, Beetle and Grimm's is also going to release their Sinister Silver edition, which is this idea of having a quality experience box set kind of thing with this release and the regular Dungeons and Dragons. They did another Beetles and Grimm's earlier.
For
I think it was like
Dragon Heist.
Yeah, like $199.
No,
area.
It was like 500, I think.
Yeah, well, this one I think is $199 was the price I saw. 175.
175, yeah, for this silver edition, yeah.
Yeah, but it's supposed to put in premium stuff that you can hold in your hands, not just like here's some extra PDFs or here's an extra printed whatever. It's like letters and maps and encounter cards that you can use at your table, a new GM screen or DM screen, booklets for each of those adventures so you can have them separate and you don't have to have the big whole book out at the same time. So all these cool things for
a Tharsden pin. Tharsden, the Mad God, is a bit of D&D lore that I really, really enjoy. And I haven't read these adventures, because these are older adventures that they're releasing for Ghosts of Saltmarsh. But apparently Tharsden comes into play because they're releasing like a Cult of Tharsden pin and some other things. And I'm just like, oh, now I'm even more excited for Ghosts of Saltmarsh. It's going to be lots of fun. But it looks like a really cool set. And they said, if you've got 5 players, everybody chips in $35, all of a sudden you're able to afford this almost $200 thing. And I was like, well, that makes sense. And if you have the right group of people and you're going to run it, like and I'm almost tempted to be like to my players, like, do you guys want to do this? Because we get all these cool handouts. It just kind of makes it a more fun experience. D&D as we play it is not expensive. Like it's expensive for the dungeon master because he buys a little more books. He might buy more miniatures for monsters and things like that. But like, really, like, you need a player's handbook and you need to print out some sheets and you need a pencil and some dice and maybe one miniature. Like it's not that expensive of a hobby for the player side. So having your players say, do you want to chip in $35 for this really cool experience, I think is completely understandable. So
yeah. And I think it's okay to have, like what you said, that you can get the free rules and play Dungeons and Dragons. You don't need anything but just the free online set. So it can really be the price that you want it to be. It could be, well, I want to own a couple of hardcover books, so that's the price of, $100 for me. And then there's those that want to play with miniatures, so maybe there's, another couple $100. It's worth it to them. But these premium sets, I think, are set for like those collector's editions.
Yeah.
People that want something a little more tangible or something a little extra, and they've got the disposable income to go ahead and put it into their hobby and buy something like that. So you kind of have really every level possible to get into the hobby, which is nice. So from free PDFs to cheap PDFs to hardcovers to special edition stuff. So.
And I've been wanting to make a video about this, but I haven't really crafted it. But I keep wondering if there's a way to play Dungeons and Dragons completely free, because you have the base rules, for free. The basic rules are free. And then there's so much homebrew content out there that people are like putting out custom classes and custom this, that I'm like, I wonder if you could just take all of that stuff, this like homebrew, collective, plus the free basic rules, and somehow play free D&D, like completely. I was going to say off the grid, but that doesn't make any sense, but completely away from traditional Dungeons and Dragons and come up with not your own rule set, because you're borrowing from everything and you're
not
using
off the
basic
grid, off
rules,
my credit card bill.
Yeah.
Statement.
Off the credit card.
Yeah. So it's exciting. So it's going to have like, what was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 adventures. Not all of them were Greyhawk. They were the U version of adventures, which I hadn't known was done by their UK studio back in the day. So these were these old, England versions of these. And then they took some from Dragon Magazine. They took some from other sources. So there's a few that come from other sources, but they all were close enough to being the same kind of theme that they could latch them all together. If you're going to be playing this and you're looking to play it, it looks like it's going to be an adventure that would take your characters from 1 to 12. I'm not sure how long it would take. I don't know how long each one of these adventures are. If we go on like the previous stuff that they've released, I mean, Storm King's Thunder, to me, if you play it all the way through, feels like almost a year and a half, 2-year campaign. Tomb of Annihilation can be almost about a year, maybe a year and a half full-on campaign. Dragon Heist, that's probably a couple of month campaign. That one's definitely a much shorter one. But if you then immediately take them to Dungeon of the Mad Mage, that feels like it's a 2 or 3 year campaign.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to go to level 20, you're not getting there very quick. So that's a big, long campaign. I'm wondering if this one, where it resides in those different campaign lengths. But it feels like if it's 7 of them, I don't know. I feel like if you're playing them all together and you're going to play them 1 to 12, just like the book presents it, then it's probably going to be about a yearish campaign, would be my guess, maybe a little more. So
I'm trying to think of like Tales of the Yawning Portal. Some of those were really long and some of them were really short. Like I think between going from the one before White Plume Mountain, or basically playing in White Plume Mountain, you were supposed to gain maybe 2 levels. And that one we finished in like 3 or 4 sessions. 3 sessions, I think, is when we played White Plume Mountain. But like a month to gain 2 levels when you're like level 7 or 8, going from 7 to 9. So it all depends. Like, I don't know. I actually looked up The Secret of Saltmarsh, the original one. And I think the original, or like back in the day, it was like 8 pages long, 9 pages long. So not really long, but The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, Danger at Dunwater, and The Final Enemy are all lumped into one kind of adventure. Like they feed on each other. They were sequential. So I don't know. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna throw it out there and say that it was like it's gonna be 8 to 9 months to play all of these, because they're older adventures that you were kind of meant to like sit down and play in 3 or 4 sessions with your party, as opposed to these epic longer things that Wizards of the Coast is putting out now that just take time. You know, depending on how much role play your party does, it just takes time.
Yeah, I could see that. So I mean, we have right now on our show the full-on historian of the Forgotten Realms world, right? So we have the leading expert on YouTube.
No, please do not.
Realms. So to really throw him under the bus and on the spot, Jordan, where are some of those areas that those of us that are playing in Forgotten Realms could put this adventure?
Oh, okay.
They're saying the Azir Sea, but where on Forgotten Realms are some cool areas that this might fit and be a night? Where could Saltmarsh go?
Well, my ideal thing would be the Sea of Fallen Stars, which is in the center of Forgotten Realms, center of Faerun, kind of that area. And that's like a previously unexplored area, but there's all kinds of, and that's more of like a giant lake, I guess. Well, no, it's a sea. It's a sea. It's large.
A sea. Yeah, it's an inner sea.
It's an inner sea. But ideally anything along the Sword Coast will work, but like we've played in the Sword Coast so much that you should throw it somewhere else. And I say should, like you can do whatever you want, but like if I were to, I would throw it over there somewhere on the Sea of Fallen Stars. And then there's other areas they can visit around there. I don't remember all of the names of the cities and towns that live around the Sea of Fallen Stars, but they're there. But yeah, like anywhere where there's water, you could even like along the coast of Zakara or something, like way out of the way, or on the other side of Karator, where they're other side of the ocean on that side. But Sea of Fallen Stars.
Felix in the back. We just saw a Felix sighting behind you.
Oh my God, Felix sighting, 10 o'clock.
My idea was, how about this one, Jordan? This is a good one, because when I heard this Saltmarsh, I kept thinking, why does this name sound familiar to me? Like when they said it, it just sounded so it resonated with me. And that's because with the very first adventure I ever ran with Jordan, who agreed to come play in a game of mine, I put it in a fictional town called Saltbreak on the Veland.
Oh yeah.
Or the Velen Coast, Velen, which was kind of south of the Sword Coast area. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. You could put this right here because it's in between where Chult was, in between where Sword Coast was, and there's a lot of craziness that could happen right there in that middle area, and you could pull from the different stuff that was going on. So for me, I think if I were to run it, I would just make Saltmarsh, Saltbreak, the town, which I created for my adventure that we played in, which was super fun, and then run it from there. Could do the Sinister Secret of Saltbreak, Danger at Dunwater, and all kind of cool stuff. So that was pretty cool.
No,
but
and
there's definitely a lot of places you can put it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like, and that's like is right there and Valine is underneath. I just had to Google it because I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a good place. But there's like a nice little cove area that you could basically jump back and forth with. There's lots of like probably piracy
out on the side. yeah, lots of cool stuff.
We got to read the adventures because depending, like if there's lots of piracy, like Luskin would be a good place for this. If there's lots of weird sea creatures, then the Sea of Fallen Stars or just north of Chult would be really cool. It reminds me, like you were saying that I was on the mark earlier about saying that this was going to be a Tales of the Yawning Portal type book. But I also remember thinking like, I think they're going to set it in Lantan, where we're going to get where the Artificer kind of comes from in the Forgotten Realms. And I don't know. So do you think, transitioning into our next topic of conversation, but do you think the Artificer is going to be in this book, or is it just going to be, no, you don't? Okay.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, no, not at all. Well, I mean, they're putting it out for testing.
Like if they're putting out for testing now, finalizing it by, you know, early May to get it printed and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, but I almost feel like they've already got that Saltmarsh printed in it's warehoused or getting warehoused or getting ready to be shipped type thing, and they're already working on the next product. I almost feel like because we're in March, so you really only have April and then May. I mean, I guess they could jam it in, but that means not very many changes, or maybe and this feels like a UA article. So what we're talking about is the Unearthed Arcana finally came out. The Artificer class was released so that you could do testing on this brand new class, and it feels like one that needs some time to sit out there and get tested because it's a lot of new stuff. It's not like the other Artificer they released before, and it has some different rules and some different mechanics to it, in fact.
Because the other one had like a gun, I think, like a cannon, and this one basically kind of has weird pets. Like you have a homunculus or homunculi, or you have a turret. Yeah. So some different routes to go with it. So the article itself, which you can find out on their Unearthed Arcana website, a couple of things that I thought I wanted to bring up. Number one is they finally backed off this idea that they're always going to put out the Unearthed Arcana at the same time. They've now moved back to we'll put it out when it's done and it's ready kind of thing. So we're not going to know a regular schedule when we get them. We just have to wait for them to tell us when they're coming. So sometimes that's bad for us because we as the customers and the clients like to know a schedule of when things are going to happen so we can anticipate it. It's there, it's ready, and it's good. But from, a developer standpoint or a creator, they need the lead way to be able to push something if it's not ready or something's not going the way they want it to, or they're still working on it type thing. So there's this middle ground that we're always trying to get those things because we want it now and they want it to only be out there when it's ready. The other thing they were talking about D&D Beyond. Usually you can get all of this test information on D&D Beyond, so you can create characters over there and you can try stuff out, which kind of helps with the testing phase because if you want to make like, what does an 8th level Artificer look like? Or what does a 20th level Artificer look like? We use those type of tools to try to roll them up. Well, they said because of the new mechanics, D&D Beyond has to take some time. So it's not quite ready for that yet. So there we're having a little bit of delay than normal because of the new mechanics they added in. And it's an interesting class because it's kind of a modified spellcaster class with, like you said, almost pets as part of the 2 they call specializations that they're releasing at this point. I don't know if there'll be a 3rd one that they release like we have with a lot of the other classes we had in the Player's Handbook, but there's 2 of them one's called the Alchemist, one's called the Artillerist, and they both read very different. It feels like if you're playing one or the other, you're a very different Artificer than the other one. And they also mention a lot of stuff like how your magic looks when you cast it. They spent a lot of time talking about the thematic theme of you're not casting spells like sorcerers or wizards. It's more like the tools you use or the objects you interact with are doing the effect. So think about that when you're playing one of these Artificers, that's how your stuff is working. Like not lay on hands, but cure wounds is not me touching you, casting cure wounds, but instead I pop open a cork and dump like a potion on your body and your skin absorbs it and that's what heals you or something. Or it's like a salve or And
it was really interesting that your arcane focus is a tool set and you cast your spells based off of one of the tool sets. So like the Thieves tools or one of the Artisan tools, those are the things you're using to make the effects of this modified spell list.
I really wanted a dwarf artificer with like Mason's tools or something.
Yeah, because that's exactly what it would be like. Yeah, perfect. And they were saying there's a blurb in there about, and I'm just kind of going through the highlights of what I saw. There's a blurb in there about gun stuff, and if you want to allow the artificer to use gun and they have proficiency in them, the DMG has the rules for guns to go look up. They talked about the spell list. Looks like a normal spell list that you would see. It's got a lot of mix of stuff that comes from a little bit of cleric, a little bit of wizard, a little bit of bard. There's like it's like they picked and chose a lot of different ones. And then there was one new spell that they put in there that you can test out. Arcane Weapon, I think is what it was. And then there's a list of how they can create objects and what types of objects they create and these different things. So it's definitely a pretty different class than we've had from any of the other player handbook classes so far. It's definitely a departure. It's like it feels like a full-on new mechanics type class. And I don't know, I've seen some people that were already theory crafting some of it. Somebody had one that was like an 8th level artificer with heavy armor proficiency, a shield, and something else that they did that somehow they got their AC up to 24.
Oh,
and
wow.
then they were able to cast shield, and that boosts it by another 5. So you're up into the 29 AC 29 part at level 8. So it's like, all right, we'll see how this goes. So there's definitely some people power gaming the numbers, and seeing where it's going to be at. I think it'd be interesting. I hope I get an opportunity to play test it at some point. I think it's a fun class from the way I'm reading it. I think I'm leaning towards the artillerist at the moment that I want to try out, versus the alchemist, but the alchemist has some interesting stuff to it too.
I'm definitely leaning towards the alchemist. Like that one seemed way cool to me, but
all right, we need to find a dungeon master to let us play like the alchemist brothers, and then you can be an alchemist and I can be artillerist.
Or the artificer brothers. Yeah,
the artificer brothers. Yeah.
We're Han and Spawn. We're the brothers of the artificers. Yeah. No, it was interesting. Like,
we'll just be called the Grimms.
Yeah, the Grimms. I really liked. I liked the class. I think it looks fun and interesting, and it feels different. But which I think is probably a struggle that Wizards of the Coast has right now is how do you make it feel different from other classes? Like this easily could have been, well, it's a little bit of bard, it's a little bit of this, and so we haven't had a pet class yet. So going into like making pets was definitely a direction to do that, but. It was interesting with Reddit because this came out and I instantly went to Reddit and I wanted to see what people were talking about. And a lot of people did not like it. I think they had strong opinions about what an artificer should be. And one of the criticisms that I saw over and over again was that, you know, the artificer is supposed to be complex and have a lot of like fine tuning and meticulous things to it. And the 5th edition rule set just doesn't lend itself to that. So they were saying that the Artificer in 5th edition just won't ever feel like it did in 3rd edition or maybe in Pathfinder. There probably was an Artificer in Pathfinder, I'm sure. So yeah. And I was like, well, you're right. Like 5th edition is supposed to be more open to new players, but I don't know. So thoughts on that, I guess. Like is 5th edition just easy mode, and does the Artificer not fit into this?
Yeah. So I definitely think it's mechanically different than the other classes. So they're going to run into something that's very different than their other classes. So the expectations are going to be weird to get met. And I know that some people really like the other Artificer that they put out, the rules that you could play with them, and they enjoyed how that worked. But now you get a very different looking one than that was. And I could see where this Artificer doesn't meet the needs of what other people want the Artificer to be, right? So I could see this one missing the mark for some people's idea, their preconceived idea of what they think the Artificer is. So is that good or bad? I don't know. I'm usually of the let's play it out. Let's try to get it on the table. Let's roll some dice with it before crushing it or saying, you know, I don't like it. Even with the Ranger and all the people that don't like the Ranger, I didn't want to ever listen to that until I actually played one, went through it, kind of struggled with whatever rules that seemed to be struggling, and then kind of make that opinion of my own where I feel like, yeah, I could probably use a little boost here or there. But I always feel like the outcry is a little more than is actually needed. Yes, there's probably some problems, or yes, there's probably something about it that maybe you don't like, you would like changed, but it always seems like the outcry is a little bit overboard versus what the actual issues are. And Reddit, boys, Reddit can be an interesting place because sometimes it can jump on the, everybody can be super happy and you get a lot of support. And then other times it turns into just like the bashing train of, we just hate it and it's dead. It should die and it should burn with fire.
And arguably the people that are making the most noise are the ones that don't like it. And that's not generally that's not a reflection of the whole, that is a reflection of the people that are making the most noise. But I just thought it was interesting because I played 4th edition, but I never played 3.5. So I don't know how meticulous 3.5 was. I just don't have that exposure to it.
Crunchy.
Yeah. But a lot of people like that. And I think they wanted a class that reflected that, and it's just not going to reflect that because 5th edition is it's a very different show mechanically. So
yeah. And I think that's one of the things that maybe computer game MMOs do a lot. The ones that are the most popular, the ones that have stayed around the most, are the ones that have a lot of different fiddly mechanical things that you can do to your character. A little bit of a +1 here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, add in this little bitty thing. And you take all these 20 or 30 things you fiddle with, and now you have your ideal character that you've been building towards. Your gear supports it. You can do all these things that you want to do. You're really building a theme of stuff, but you need, 15 to 20 knobs to turn and be able to move around to get to there. And that's what 3.5 really felt like at the ends of 3.5. It was, here's a lot of bits and bobs and feats and all these things that you could do that you could just tweak a little bit to get to that final image of what you wanted for your character. Whereas 5th edition's kind of just, like you said, smooth that out. It doesn't need to be, 20 knobs per character that you turn around to create it. So it's a different style. I still love it. I still love playing it. I still love running it. I think it's smooth as a dungeon master to run. I think for players, maybe they do want a little bit more that they could do to personalize their character or to make their barbarian different than the other barbarians that are being played out there, different. My paladin's different than the other paladins, and not just by RP, not just by how I describe how I do things, but really truly mechanical differences built into the game. Maybe that's the thing that they're missing off the mark a little bit at the moment, is giving these players that really want to fine tune and tweak things those options. Maybe it's just needs a bigger feat list. And that would solve the whole, I would really like to have these little things, because that's what feats really are, right? These little bonuses that if you take one at first, if you're a variant human, or you take it at 4th instead of your attribute upgrade, that you can tweak it a little bit of a different way than any other fighter is, or barbarian is, or ranger is, or sorcerer is, because I took all of a sudden heavy armor proficiency, or I took alertness, or I took this. That turns me in a different way. Maybe that's what they really need, is just a nice, big, robust feat list that allows people to take them at certain points that would let everybody just really tweak their characters out.
Yeah, or the ability to take a feat without losing your, and maybe that's just a homebrew, you say, is everyone's allowed one feat without without losing the ability score increase or something like that. So, or a magic item that gives you a feat. I'm a big fan of turning feats into magic items because, but And
I think Game Master Vault in chat and is really on the point here. Those of us who play from the beginning, as we get in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, we always want more. The issue is it becomes the bloat that new people coming into the hobby will start to complain about, or it'll start to turn off people from actually entering the hobby, because all of a sudden it feels like they need 7 books before they can play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, because now there's been so much added. And it happens to every game, because you start out with what the game is at its base, you keep adding stuff because that's what your hardcore players and your people that are there all the time want. But then eventually there's so much that you've added, you alienated the group that gets to come in for the first time and try to play it. And then they start all over. We get we get 6th edition at some point, and we go right back to where we were, I think. So I think that's the thing that developers play around with, is how much content to put out before it's too much, how much is overload, how much is good. I'm sure it's a hard thing. I wouldn't know how to make that decision, if it was my company. I don't know where I would go. I'd want to be giving people book after book after book, so I'd probably bloat my RPG pretty quickly.
Well, and that's the catch-22. Like, you're a company that sells books, you want to sell books, but at what point do you want to hurt your brand by overselling just bloat, just crap, Yeah. So
yeah, keeping the quality up. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing. Just another couple of news things. The Stranger Things starter set should be out in the next month or so. It's supposed to be releasing pretty soon. I think if you have friends that maybe have heard about Dungeons and Dragons but haven't made the plunge, this is like the Christmas gift or the birthday gift, or just a, hey, I heard you kind of like you've been thinking about Dungeons and Dragons. Here's a starter set. Why don't you take a look at this? And if you want to play, let me know. I'll play with you. Or, just get people going, or give it to your nephews or your nieces, or, the kids that are growing up, and just saying, here's your starter set to get going. I think that's going to be really cool when it's out. I think I'm going to buy it just to have it, even though we've talked about this on our previous shows. I don't need a starter set. I play Dungeons and Dragons every week. I have all the books on my shelf, but I think I'm still going to buy a starter set just for fun, just to have it.
Yeah.
That's coming out. And when we do find out the actual date, we'll definitely let you guys know in our show. The only other thing I saw on your notes, you were talking about D&D book that was going to be aimed at middle school.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Let me go talk about that for a little bit. So I don't know much about this, but they're releasing 2 books called Warriors and Weapons, and the other book is called Monsters and Creatures. And it's basically like, I'm not sure yet if it's a simplified version of the rules, or if it's just the books kind of redone with new art or something that are aimed at middle schoolers. But they're creating a couple new books that are aimed at a younger audience for D&D, which I thought was really cool. So that's coming out soonish. I'm not sure, maybe this summer. They're going to be like $14, I think, $15 for each book. So it's just cheaper. But it's the idea of D&D for a younger adventurer. So it'll have the key aspects of D&D, and they can build their own characters and have adventures. And they're going to make a lot more books in this genre of D&D for middle schoolers. But yeah, and so if you're Nathan in chat was just like, well, I should get those for my kids. And I'm like, exactly. Like if 5th edition is a little too crunchy for your 5th grader, maybe this is the direction to go to get them into D&D. So definitely could be really cool. It's a gateway drug of role playing games.
I was just gonna say, get him in our cult, please.
But yeah, so you can check out on Amazon. I think you can pre-order them there for pretty cheap. I probably won't be picking these up.
We can put it in chat.
Let me look and see if I have a link. I have a couple links. I'll put it in chat right meow. Cool.
So that was pretty much our news.
Oh, and one more thing I wanted to say is that the Saltmarsh, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, is going to have 2 covers. I don't think we mentioned that. So one of them, it'll have like the special edition cover that is for game stores only, and then it'll have the regular cover, which I don't really like the alternative cover. It's kind of like Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I didn't like that alternative cover either.
See, I'm the opposite. I liked it.
So I was happy to get just my regular one, but to each their own. And it not that it's a bad cover. It's just if I had to choose between the 2, I think. And I've been leaning towards the regular books because they aesthetically match the rest of my other books that I have bought. So yeah, I like the standard covers. But
I don't know if I want to buy it yet, because normally, if I'm going to buy these, I'm going to run them using Roll20. So normally it makes more sense for me to buy the full module set on Roll20 where everything is set up. So I keep waffling back and forth. I did it here. I bought Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I bought Dragon Heist in book form, even though I haven't really run them. But I keep waffling back and forth to, do I really want to keep buying these twice or even 3 times if you buy the stuff on, then you buy it on D&D Beyond so that you get all that stuff in there. So now it's a 3rd time. then you get a PDF version of it somewhere and you buy it a fourth time. So I'm really struggling with making sure I only buy the copy I'm going to use. But I do think I like having the physical books in my hand. So I don't know. I almost stopped at the game store to order mine just because I'm a sucker for alternate covers. I'm a sucker for special edition stuff. So that's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to pick up Ghost of Saltmarsh, a physical book. I'm really excited. And I think like the direction my Hot Springs Island game is going, I might be able to, like, they'll finish Hot Springs Island, well, probably before May, but it would be cool to have that book to be like, and now you guys are level 10. Let's run the last like couple adventures in this book to kind of finish off our seafaring exploration kind of, and I'll set, Saltmarsh on the Hot Springs Island somewhere. It's another island out there that they explore. That could be a lot of fun. That's my grandmaster plan that probably won't happen because I think they're gearing up to finish Hot Springs Island before then, but we'll see. We'll see.
They have a wish. How can they not finish it up? They have a wish.
They used their wish. Did I tell you? I think I did. Yeah.
Yep, they used it. But we haven't heard what happened with it. I think that's coming up yet.
Oh, yeah, correct. So, but what games did you play this week, sir? I know you were traveling a lot, so.
Yeah, so the actual physical week. Now, it's funny to me because in my brain, because me and Jordan have been doing this show for a year now, and we're already starting on our second year. A week for me starts from the end of this show till when it begins again. So that's how my week. So it's from Saturday morning to Saturday morning. So the regular work week, Monday through Friday, I didn't play any Dungeons and Dragons or anything. I traveled to Kansas and I did some work. But on Saturday before that, just after our show, Saturday night last week, I played one of our Seeking Revenant. It's our big homebrew West Marches game. You hear me talk about it all the time. We played a great session. The players went and fought some creatures. They got a lot of new information about why every time they go back, it's almost like this place resets and they have to fight the same thing over and over and over. They get to the same spot. Now they're out of spells. They're out of potions. They're out of everything. Everybody's hurting and they have to retreat again. And then when they come back, they've done the same thing like 3 times now. And it's dawned on them finally after the 3rd time. I've been waiting for this to dawn on them that why is it we always fight the same number of things and we always have to do the same thing and we always get to the same spot, but we can never get any further. And they finally have figured out why that is. There's some things that are happening that make that happen. So now they're starting to plan about how do we stop it from happening so we can actually make some leeway here or make some down into this dungeon, get actually down in there without using up all our stuff. So that's cool. It's been fun. They met a nice big orc warband on the way home. There's this big tension that's set up because they're not sure if the orc warband is there to sack the city that they all are from or not. And so they've all been speculating in our Discord channel where they do a lot of RP stuff. And so they're all worried about, wait a minute, there's this big orc warband that's about to descend and they don't know about it yet. So we're about to find out what that's going to happen. And we should have some games this week where we're going to go ahead and run them. I'm still struggling with, I know I've said this before, about bringing another dungeon master in to play in the campaign. But the more I sit there and think about it, and the more I think about the logistics of trying to get somebody up to speed, coordinating with each other on how this is going to work, keeping a certain level of play quality that I would like, but yet not stamp down on somebody who's a dungeon master and not let them use their creativity and do the things they want to do. It's just a lot to consider without just diving in and saying, okay, Jordan, you can DM for me on Tuesdays and I'll do Thursdays and we'll just make it work. There's a lot that goes into thinking about it, and especially if you're going to stream them. So it's got to be someone that's going to be able to stream, that you can trust can stream games, knows how to do the whole thing, wants to do the whole thing. So it's just been a little bit bigger than I wanted to chew so far. It may still happen. It may not. I'm still figuring it out, but we'll see. If it does, I'll bring it here and I'll tell you guys the bonuses and the negatives, I guess, of if you try something like this, just like I've been trying to do with the West Marches. What are the good things and what are the bad things about it when you're doing a hex crawl West Marches style game? Then on Sunday, we played our RPG crash course show, which is we pick an RPG for the month and we play a game. I picked John Harper's World of Dungeons Breakers, with the main name of it is Breakers, and we had a really fun adventure based on kind of the a very shortened version of the Apocalypse Engine games where two worlds kind of overlap for a little while, and until you break a shard or a key in that area, and then they kind of drift apart. So things get taken over. So in this case, a mall that was in Detroit got taken over, and it got overlapped by another world that had goblins and orcs and all this other kind of stuff, and they overlapped. And so the groups have to go in and try to get the shard, destroy it, so that the worlds pull apart again before anything escapes from that area, because now it's there's almost like a portal there. And it's more corporate because all these companies create these, what they call like these dive teams that go in, dive in, get the thing, and they're paid a bounty for it. So they're competing against other corporate entities. So they made their own corporate, I let the players kind of come up with the name of it. And it was really funny because it was like the company had bought up all of the old Toys R Us stores and turned their company training facilities in old Toys R Us stores. So we had a lot of fun with this weird, funny kind of corporate look, almost like playing Ghostbusters if you wanted to play it as an RPG, or Army of Darkness was another kind of creative idea of how to play the game, and it was just fun. They ran in, they got their butts kicked, they got taken out, and it was another corporate group got the shard, so they didn't get the bounty. But it was really fun to play. It was a different thing, and we're going to have a new one tomorrow, which, because this month has so many Sundays in it, which is nice. So there's going to be 5 Sundays in March. So we're going to pick an RPG that requires more time. So I'm going to pick something bigger. I might do like a Numenera. I might do the Strange. I might do, I just bought the Humble bundle for Pathfinder.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
now
really
I have
good bundle.
every single possible PDF for Pathfinder I could ever possibly want. I might dive into that to try that out, to play a little bit of that. Or any one of these other number of books that I bought.
Overlight, cough, Overlight.
Yeah, there you go. Overlight would be a good one. Yep. We could do a Kids on Bikes. We could do something. Tales from the Loop, something like that. So I'm going to pick it by tomorrow, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to make characters. We could do Warhammer was the other one I've been dying right up there. My favorite game of all time. I've got the newest edition that's out. So those were the things that I did. So I mostly traveled during the week, but on the weekend I got to play. And this weekend I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a bunch of playing in, and I'll be ready to go. But I think it was so excited about all the news. I wasn't worried about playing games. I was just thinking about the new articles out. I was thinking about Saltmarsh a lot this week. So it was just really helping me refresh for that. So what did Jordan do in RPGs this week?
What did Jordan do in RPGs? Well, been playing my Warforged game with some of my friends from my Hot Springs Island game, and that's been a lot of fun. And just kind of leveling up, exploring the Underdark, doing missions. We ended up fighting a really interesting, and I don't know if I talked about this last week or not. I don't think I did. But we fought this interesting cube monster that the DM would roll a d6 and it would change sides. And depending on the side that it was on, that was the attack that it had that round. And I really liked this idea of, well, A, a monster I didn't recognize, but B, like, I like the randomness of it. It was kind of like a Beholder where you roll randomly for the eye stalks and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. And then in my Hot Springs Island game, my Hot Springs Island players got, they used their wish to get the layout of Svarku's lair, who's the Efreet that kind of like runs Bartertown, runs Hot Springs Island. And they decided to explore down into the area. So they found like what they are calling a back entrance. They're like, or the safest entrance they could find is through this, the slave quarters, the abandoned slave quarters. And they're going to go through that. Now I've mentioned this before, but I roll randomly on Hot Springs Island. So whenever they come into an area, I roll a whole bunch of dice. The dice tell me how many monsters are there and where. Earlier, they had captured a salamander, and they decided to use this salamander. His name was Blix, I think. And Blix, they decided to use him to kind of scope out the area and see what's down there. So if there were salamanders down there, he could be like, I vouch for these guys. They're really awesome. But they weren't especially nice to Blix. And so when they let him go, he agreed to come back and relay whatever information he could find. He went down into the slave quarters, down into underground, and never came back. He just
So
disappeared.
wait, so the salamanders are like bipedal humanoid.
Yeah. Yeah, they've got armor and weapons and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so they captured and then they interrogated one, but it cracked me up because they were very like, okay, we can trust this guy. And in my mind, I'm just like, he wants to get the hell away from you as quickly as possible. Like, all right, he'll go along with this. And so they let him go and he just took off. I mean, he like went to the slave quarters. He's like, all right, I'll be back. And then he just took off running. And I remember they all looked at the ranger and they were like, did you cast Hunter's Mark on him so we could track him? And the ranger was like, no. And then I'm like, and I was like, another 30 minutes goes by and nothing happens. And they're just like, oh man, what did we do? So
the Ocean's 11 plan begins to fall apart.
So they dive in to try and like A, find him, but B, kind of see what's going on. And so they come down there. They find a bunch of fire imps that they clean up pretty easy. They explore a couple of other areas and then they find a door and they're like, oh, this door must lead to the area that goes to Svarku's palace, because why else would it have a door? Like the palace entrance must have a door is what they kept thinking.
Well, don't they have a map? Didn't they get a map?
Not of this section yet. They have a map of Svarku's lair, but they're in this this slave quarters area, this underground mine area that leads to Svarku's lair. So they're like expecting that they'll find a door or something. They open the door and they find 5 drunk salamanders that are hanging out, and they see them and they instantly know who they are because these guys have been messing up the salamanders for a while. So the salamanders like know who they are. And we have one of the toughest fights that I've thrown at my players yet, I think. And I say that, but earlier they had a really tough fight that actually resulted in a player death. But this one was, they're level 7 now, and they have a little more healing than they did before. Mm-hmm. And then I said that the salamanders were drunk. So as they were fighting the salamanders, one of my players were like, well, they're kind of drunk. Do we get advantage on them or anything? And I'm like, I'll roll to see how drunk they are before every round. And so I'm like, I'll just roll a D20. If it's an 11 and a 12, if it's 11 to 20, they're sober enough to fight you. If it's, 1 to 10, they're drunk enough that they don't really know what's going on. But I did that. And I would say a good 80% of the time, those salamanders were ready to fight. And so, not to bore everyone with like a exorbitant amount of details, but a lot of players went down, and I made the decision as a dungeon master to roll in the open because I want my players to know that especially with Hot Springs Island, that I'm not trying to fudge rolls. Because I am rolling so randomly for encounters and I am rolling randomly for locations, that I want my players to understand that I'm like, it is the dice that is doing this to you, not necessarily the dungeon master.
I'm not killing you. The dice are killing you.
And not even like I'm killing you, but the fact that like Jordan's not protecting you. Jordan is playing Hot Springs Island rules, which makes this more dangerous. And it's something that I want to incorporate in my homebrew game because I'll be honest, I want my players to have a fun time. And by thinking that, I want them to live. And so I have fudged a lot of rolls in my home game in the past. Mm-hmm. But with Hot Springs Island, I made the decision that I wanted to play a different style. And it's resulted in a character death early on. But the players, I think, are having a lot of fun and they're taking situations seriously. And in this one, the ranger was at a point where he's like, I'm going to just cast Zephyr. Is it Zephyr Strike or something? The spell that lets him move really fast. He's like, I'm going to cast it on myself and just run away.
Expeditious retreat.
Yeah, basically. Like, I'm going to just get out of here. And they're like, no, we can do this. We can do this. But it was a lot of like the barbarian went down and then they would like raise him up. But unfortunately his turn was right after the salamanders. So they would raise him up and then the salamanders would just smack him down again. The salamanders breathe fire, which recharges on a 5 or a 6. I rolled that out in the open. I'm like, we got 1 salamander left. You guys are lined up so he can hit all 3 of you. Let's roll a d6 and see what happens. It was a 6. So everybody make dex saves again. You guys are getting hit by this fire, which instantly put like 2 of them down again. It got down to the very end when they raised the sorcerer, I think, or maybe it was the barbarian, with his last spell slot so that they could do 1 attack it was the sorcerer. They raised the sorcerer to do 1 attack. She cast Chromatic Orb at 3rd level using her Tides of Chaos so that she gets advantage on it, and she rolled a 1 and a 2. And missed the spell. And it was this like clutch moment where we're like, you guys were not meant to win this. The cleric came in, hit it with a mace, did some turn undead stuff that they have special to their class to do some extra damage, because the salamander was at like 5 health and the salamander dropped, spared the dying on the other 2, dragged their carcasses into the room, closed the door. They're like, even though it's about 10 in the morning, we're taking a long rest. And I'm like, completely understandable. You guys are like half dead. And that's where we ended. And so it's interesting because they didn't even make it to Svarku's lair yet. They're just outside the entrance to it. But if that is any indication of what's waiting for them, I'm really curious about how they're going to go forward. Are they going to pass without a trace and try to sneak everywhere and have no more engagements? Because there's going to be more salamanders in the palace probably. Like, they don't know what's in there yet, but one can say the tougher monsters are going to be closer to the boss. So we'll see. It was an almost TPK. Like, it came really close, and it was really interesting to roll out in the open and just be like, here's what it is, guys. Yeah. You know, I do this. The flame breath is 7d6. And so I was constantly like, all right, you take another 34 damage. They're like, are you serious? I'm like, yep, you're almost dead. But that was my weekend gaming. I'm actually playing directly after this show. I'm going to drive to my friend's house, and we're going to play in the Warforged campaign or the game where I'm playing my Warforged character. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then, yeah. So I'm also playing a little bit of Dungeon Crawl Classics with a patron. He is instigated a Dungeon Crawl Classics game and invited me to play. And that's been really fun because we're playing multiple level 1 characters. So I have a thief, a wizard, and an elf. And I get to kind of like, it's interesting because you know how you try to coordinate with your party members? You're like, if you do this, I'll do this. Because I have 3 characters, I can kind of do that. I can be like, well, I'll position my thief here. My elf will cast this on my thief. My thief will be able to do something cool. And that's been a lot of fun. So, yeah. Yeah. And that's my weekend gaming, I guess.
Yay. It's a lot of gaming. Sounds good. I like the idea that in the last few weeks, I've also had a few TPK moments where it comes down to like one more dice roll goes against them. And it's like a bunch of dice rolls went against them to even get them to this point.
Yeah.
But if just one more happens, if this one last roll happens, it's done, it's over. But then they pull it out on that last die roll and they finally make their way, or they get away, or, you know, they do this thing. So it's like this crazy, and they're like tense, like they get done with it and they're like huge size at the end of the game. They're drained. They talk about it for the whole week leading up to the next and what we're going to do.
I think we had 5 natural ones the entire game, which was a lot for that encounter. Like, I was really surprised on their side. On my side, I was rolling really well.
Yeah. A hot DM dice night can really hammer a party. That's what happened in the one where my group almost died. I just kept rolling really well for them, and they were missing left and right. They were missing, even when they had advantage, like you said, they were still rolling like 5s and 10s and 9s and 7s, and they just couldn't hit. They had all the power in the world if they could just get their dice to hit, and they were missing. And then mine was like, here's a 22, here's a 25, because all my twink players have humongously high ACs. So the one thing that they're all realizing now, that the problem with having a really high AC is that when you get hit, you usually get hit super hard, because the only thing that gets through their AC is something that hits really, really hard. So they've got this really weird thing where I can't be hit. Oh my God, almost all my hit points are gone.
That one hit took out half my hit points. Yeah,
because it's a crit that actually finally gets through their huge AC. So, but I'm like, hey, you're playing those characters. We'll see how it works.
Yeah.
It was your idea.
No, so. It's also interesting. The barbarian has a axe in my game, a great axe that does double damage to fire creatures. And in their mind, they're just like, this is going to be our salvation. But every time you hit a salamander, it does 2d6 fire damage back to you. And so it got to the point where he was at 1 hit point. He's like, I can't attack or I'll die. So he was throwing javelins, which did significantly less damage than his great axe that does double damage. And they were realizing, like, this is it's a double-edged sword, this magic item. Like, it does a lot of damage against them, but it slowly whittles him away on hit points. So
it's funny you say that, because that's the thing that finally got to my players, because my players typically play a lot of melee heavy characters. It was when they fought like a Remoraz, the thing that does damage back to you if you're within 5 feet of melee range every time you hit it, that it was like, oh my God, we're killing ourselves fighting this thing. But it's because we made barbarians and fighters and paladins. And it was like, we're surrounding the creature, but we're just killing ourselves fighting it. So it's funny that you say that. So there you go, GMs out there. If you have a very melee heavy group that's giving you trouble, just throw some of those creatures at them.
Yeah.
They'll back off a little bit.
It's true. No, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I think when I finish Hot Springs Island, I'm going to do a huge long video on like my experience with running it and recommending it and things like that, because it's been a really fun adventure so far. But
yeah. Cool.
And I think that's our show, everybody.
That's it.
Thank you for coming out and watching us live here on the Saturday Morning D&D show. We are live 9 a.m. Pacific time every Saturday. I'm seeing a couple of people in the YouTube chat that are just like, oh, I made it. And I'm like, just as we're closing up.
Yes.
But feel free to watch the VOD. Anything else before we bounce out of here?
Keep going in a few seconds.
Oh, just a few seconds? Okay, because you've got a air horn happening behind you. That makes exact sense. Please, if you guys are so inclined, give us a review on iTunes. We're trying to get a couple more reviews going with that. It just helps with people discovering the podcast. And like us, like the video, share it with your friends, all this other stuff. Enjoy Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Leave a comment below if you were going to buy Ghosts of Saltmarsh and what you were most excited for. Lucian is still nodding as he's got this going.
You can probably hear it a little bit. It's a little bit quieter at the moment. I'll try to speak over it. But I just wanted to say, for the YouTube people, thanks for showing up. If you're watching this on YouTube, not on the day that we're live, we still appreciate you coming out and watching. Put those comments in, because we definitely like to interact with you guys. And I can't wait.
And with that, I think we will bounce out of here. We will see you guys next Saturday with another episode. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I got to do the outro. Good.